right. Start the recording. Admit everybody. And John, Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am still in Illinois, so there's still no bell. And the Monday, January 27th, 2025 budget board meeting for the Oregon Country Fair Board of Directors will come to order. And the first item of business is announcements. Is there any announcements? Raise your hand in chat. No, I see chat. Last call. Are there any announcements? Raise your hand in chat. Is everybody in now?
Yeah, everybody's in.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda review, amend and approve. We don't need to do anything with it now. We'll just separate when the motion comes up. So is there any other?
Sorry, Steve.
So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, it was an announcement. I forgot.
Go ahead.
I am trying to remember the date. Kirsten, please help me with the date. The board had a closed session on personnel and other topics on January.
I think it was 13th, but let me double check that. Yes, it was January 13th. Monday, January 13th.
Monday, January 13th. Decisions were made, but confidential. Thanks.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, we're going to take the motion for the budget as a single package and then ask if anyone wants to separate anything. So no need to alter that in agenda review. Is there any other agenda review issues? Raise your hand in chat. Last call for agenda issues. Seeing none, we'll move on to the treasurer's report.
Hi there. I'll just give an overall introduction to what we're doing tonight. This is kind of a continuation of topics that were discussed at the financial planning meeting and then presented at the revenue projection that we did in December. And at both of those meetings, there were estimated cash flow statements, and they were updated at the December meeting where the board passed the revenue. And all of these budgets that are being presented to you now are within the range of the cash flows that we did at that time. So we didn't find huge exceptions to what we were doing. And the budget committee has reviewed all of these. They've worked with staff on them. And then staff has entered the numbers into the budget module of QuickBooks, and the board can see it there. And at this point, it looks as if we would, on a cash flow basis, be making money. And it will look different after we pass the capital projects, because when we put the budget in for the capital projects, we budget them as if they were current cash flow, even though eventually some will be capitalized and it really won't affect our bottom line from an accounting point of view, but from a cash flow point of view, it would. Nonetheless, what we have now and what we are presenting is the operating expenses, which are well within the black for this year, and the capital projects will come out of money that we have either in reserve or money that has been specifically designated for those projects. So I'll point out some of the major changes that are in these budgets compared to last year's budgets. In the board budget, we're recommending restoring the board giving line item, and at a level that is a little bit higher than it was before. And this will go through the new process. It won't go through giving that's done at each board meeting, but it'll be a separate process that then may or may not come back to the board. That's being restored at a level of $35,000, which is, I forget, $5,000 to $10,000 higher than it was previously, which brings the total philanthropy within the board budget to $75,000, $20,000 for the endowment money and $20,000 for the match the board match for the Jill Hyman Vision Fund, and 35 for the board giving, which is the more general giving program. In the crew budgets, there's some major changes. The biggest one is changing the valuation of the food voucher per hour calculation from $3 to $4. We have about 100,000 volunteer hours, which means that increases $100,000. So that's a huge change there. In general, we asked the crews to take a budget freeze and a pass freeze and hold tight and try to identify where they're, how the current budget is working for them. We did allocate a 3% inflation adjustment to all the supplies and services budgets. We did some transfers. We did very few additions. We're trying not to solve problems at an operational level by adding more passes. We're trying to be strategic and figure out where we can reallocate resources. And probably the biggest change that exemplifies that is taking some functions that was entertainment transportation and entertainment hosting and putting that into one crew. And it was just a straight across the board, transferring them out of one crew, adding it to another crew, and changing the focus of that crew. And Sunny and the rest of the staff are working really closely with them to make that a smooth transition. And we're really hoping that kind of model going forward will help us adapt to right sizing and our eliminating uncontrolled, unwanted growth. The Culture Jam budget had some increases, and most of that is due to staffing increases. All the budgets that are associated with particular staff people, which we've been calling department budgets most recently, those were all worked on very, very closely with the staff person who is most in charge of those. They did a lot of research. They talked to vendors that, the contracts are already under negotiation. So questions on those would go to that staff person who has done a lot of work with them. And the budget committee also, questioned and, informed themselves about that. I'll point out the biggest change in there is the continuation that we've had for 3 years now, the issues that we've had around our toilet provider. We went from having our porta potties, that service provided for under $150,000, around $150,000, to now we're budgeting $475,000, almost $500,000 for our toilet providers. So we didn't pay that much last year. We budgeted that much, and I'm not sure exactly what the contract was, but Kirsten worked with the provider afterwards to point out all the deficiencies in their service, the way they did not follow through on the services that they had expected to provide, and we ended up paying quite a bit less than what they originally estimated. This year, once again, Kirsten and the rest of the staff are working really closely with the providers, but trying to get the level of service up to where it's really adequate and safe for people. And we may end up spending that entire amount. We don't know, but that's what has been given to us as a best estimate of what it will cost to have that level of service. So those are the main things I have to say. So I'm going to turn it over to the board members who are making the motions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to the budget business. And the way this is going to work, we have 7 sections of the budget. And the total expense is not really part of the motion, because if you change any part of the budget, the total changes. It's simply a sum of the rest. We're going to move to adopt all of the budget sections as one motion and ask to separate. We know that crew budget is already going to get separated. Then we will take member input on the remaining budget items in case that conversation from member input causes anyone to want to separate another section of the budget before we then pass the package or vote on the package and then vote on the individual sections that are separated. That's a lot. Trust me, it's all in my head, but that's how we're going to proceed. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2025 budget sections, including the board budget for $146,400, the crew budget for $1,219,637, the Culture Jam budget for $79,650, the office management budget for $74,400, the site and facilities budget for $664,100, the event management budget for $585,779, and the general management budget for $1,094,890. Would anyone like to make that motion? Unmute and make that motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Moved by AJ and seconded by George Braddock. You weren't here for the pre-planning. Is there someone who would like to separate the crew budget?
I will so
Here's-
move.
No, we're doing any board member can separate, so just.
I'm a
anyone
board
say-
member.
Yeah, so just no need for motion. Is there
No.
any other section of the budget for which anyone wants to see a separation and discuss separately? Any board members? Last call.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
ask a question about that?
Yes.
If we have a couple questions about the budget, we don't need to necessarily know which one it is and in which section it is and ask. it
Not
to be removed
necessarily,
to
but we're
discuss
gonna not necessarily, but we're gonna discuss the package first, so
Cool.
you'll
Great.
have an
Sure, fine.
opportunity then with.
it. Thank you.
It's not in crew to. Is there any other sections to separate? Last call? Seeing none, we're going to move forward with all of the budget sections except crew budget and take member input. Is there any member input on these budget items? Everything except crew budget. Raise your hand in chat. Last call. Is there any member input on any of the other budget sections? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Raise your hand in chat. Or just talk, John, because I could see you're trying to raise your hand in chat. But you're muted.
And now I got to find my mute. All right. Finding chat, then mute. So if in questions about assumptions around inflation and or around the portos would go now, or was that drawn out?
Go ahead. Yeah, just to throw the
Yeah,
question.
okay, so
on the
great. So
table.
just real quick, I appreciate, this might be a tough question. I appreciate the inflation bit. That was a good detail. Thank you, Hillary. If let's say, and I think it was 4% you mentioned that you were estimating increased
This
costs
is
on
3%. And
Three-
we have been doing inflation for the last 2 or 3 years. This
Right.
is not the first time we've inflated the budgets in response to rising costs.
So do you know what if our inflation is 6% instead of 3%, what the general impact on the budget is?
Inflation is not at 6% right now. It's closer to 3%.
That's not my question. My question is if it were to change and had been that or something increased, is it a significant different in the estimate than or impact on the expenses? And how much of one? If you don't know that, that's fine.
Do you want me to calculate 3% of the board of the supplies and services? I mean, that's what you're saying. If we didn't,
I can look at, yeah, okay.
inflation is a basket of goods, and different items in the basket go up and down at different rates. And sometimes it's fuel and sometimes it's wood. It really depends, when we were coming out of that period, or right in the middle and coming out of that period of very, very high inflation, the budget committee and board approved very large increases for construction and for fuel and for items that we knew were specifically affected. But going ahead, yeah, we don't know what the inflation rate will be for 2025. We're making the best guess that based on 2024, and we're hoping that's where it comes in. If we end up needing to do a budget adjustment, we do a budget adjustment later. Say if, eggs or something that really affects our budgeting goes way, way up. We can always respond during the year as well.
Can I clarify my question?
Go ahead.
I guess if you know what that percentage adjustment was, that's great. I'm not questioning the assumptions that you made. I'm just asking about the potential consequences of sometimes our assumptions being wrong, because consequences are sometimes greater or less than we ever could have imagined. But I'm sure it's a great number.
I tried to answer that. I tried to say that we will, if we're faced with some price increases that we need to deal with, we can deal with it through the year.
Can I try and clarify here for, not to question what you're saying at all, Hillary, but I think with the reason John's having a hard time with the answer is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that inflation affects different things throughout the budget, not 3% across the board. And a lot of the costs there won't change and other ones will. So giving an exact answer to the question is difficult. Is that an accurate assessment, Hillary?
Sure. You know, none of us have a crystal ball telling us what's going to happen in 2025. So this is our best effort at making ourselves ready to go into 2025.
But a 3% inflation increase wouldn't affect every part of the budget. So giving an answer on the impact is more complicated. Is that correct?
Are you asking me to give a specific
Yeah,
number,
I'm
John,
asking-
of the inflationary impacts?
I'm
I'm
asking
just
if it's
wondering what that
complicated.
cost
Yeah.
ended up being. That's all. What the 3% cost ended up being, and then we can all do in our heads what it would be if it came in under or above. And it might be in a line item that I missed. I just was listening to your report, and that was a question that came in my mind about what are the consequences currently and potentially if it goes up or goes down. So I guess I'm just looking for what was the 3% on those items that you
On the supplies,
applied it to.
it's the supply, all the supplies and services we increase. So all the contracts for entertainers, for example, can go up by that amount. And we can look on the worksheet that we use to track the budget. And maybe Kirsten can pull that out, just the supplies and service amount, and look at what the 3% of that was. But we don't add up all the supplies and services independently in these reports, but we have it in other reports. It's
Do
about
some rounding.
$1,000 is what
Go ahead,
I'm.
Kirsten.
24 S&S was 3.1, 25 is 3.4. Thank you. So $300,000 variance in that 3% increase.
30,000.
Yes, sorry, 30,000. I'm sorry.
Is that clear as mud, John?
That's right.
I'm going to sort it out myself now and not belabor it. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you. AJ.
Yeah, I just wanted to state for the membership that's here that the board, if it chose to, board members have had months to kind of look in or go to a board or a budget meeting, ask questions, and get feedback. So if you see us not asking a bunch of questions tonight, I can speak for myself as a board member. In this case, I've been paying attention to what the budget committee has been doing for several months now, and had an opportunity to ask questions if I had them.
Thank you. Kirsten.
Yeah, I want to clarify. I was way a little high, but it was closer to 300 than it's $231,140 difference in supplies and services. In 2024, it was $3,179,134. In 2024, we're asking for $3,410,273. And that's
Kirsten, let's follow up on that. Here we have crew budgets at 1.2 million, and of that, about 400,000 is food vouchers. So I'm thinking our supplies and services is closer to 800,000.
I'm sorry. I will say I was looking at the totals. That's our total for S&S across all of the departments as well. So
okay, and that's including all of the office management, the site, the event management, general management.
Yeah,
that's including all the department budgets and not just the crew supplies and services.
Right. So I'm going to look up just crew. So give me a second.
It's going to be about 800,000. So about 24,000 was the inflation adjustment that just went to crew supplies and services.
Yeah, 20,575. So it's 771,000 in S&S for crews in 24, 792 for crews in 25, a difference of $20,575. So that's the inflation.
And then the inflation adjustment that went into the department budgets was a little bit more refined. We tried to make some kind of inflation adjustment, but it was a lot more specific, looking at line items and analyzing that specific line item for the types of costs that we knew were happening, or adjusting it to the contracts or the bids that we knew we had coming in.
And if you look at the spreadsheet, or the 25 versus 24 spreadsheet that I sent you, it tells you what the percent variance is across every item on that spreadsheet. So you can look at the totals, you can look at individual lines, you can look at individual departments. So John, your answer is in that spreadsheet.
Okay, there are no more hands up. Last call. Is there any further discussion on all of the budget sections except the crew budget? Is there any board member who wants to separate another part of the budget? Raise your hand in chat to separate or speak, and last call. Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to a vote. This is for the board budget, Culture Jam budget, office management budget, site and facilities budget, event management budget, and general management budget. AJ,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
John Alexander,
Yes.
John Govsky,
Yes.
John Steinhardt,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Paxton.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Arna and John Davis absent. Moving on to the crew budget of $1,219,637. Will somebody move to adopt that, please?
So move.
So moved.
Beat you again, Sandra. Do you want a second?
I'll second it.
Moved by AJ and seconded by Sandra. Is there any member input on, well, let's have either Kirsten or someone introduce the issue before we make an amendment so that we can get member input and they can know what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you. I need a board member to make an amendment to the internal security coordinator budget. It currently shows as $250. They have 3 coordinators and it should be $750. So I'm asking the board to adjust that cruise coordinator budget by $500 to reflect a $750 coordinator crew budget. How we missed that over the last couple of years, I don't know, but we caught it this year and we'd like to make it right for them. Thank you.
Is there a
I
board
so
member who'll make that
moved.
motion? So we get
Second.
staying unmuted. So moved by Sandra and seconded by John Govsky, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any member input on the $500 increase? Any member input at all? Raise your hand in chat. This is a $500 increase to the coordinator budget, the coordinator expenses of the internal security budget. Okay, seeing no member input, we'll go to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Last call for board discussion. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. AJ,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
John Alexander,
Go, yes.
John Govsky,
Yes.
John Steinhardt,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Paxton.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Arna and John Davis absent. So the crew budget is now $1,220,000.
$20,137.
And that is the motion on the floor. Is there any member input on the crew budget item as amended? Last call for member input. Raise your hand in chat. I'm gonna take a beat here. Anybody else? Last call. Seeing none, we'll go to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, I ask this question every year, I think, around this time, and I want to see how we have improved. And that is, did we see any improvement in crews staying within their budget this past year versus the previous year?
Kirsten,
We
do you
do.
want to respond to that?
I can,
Go
you know,
ahead,
off the
Hillary.
top of my head, you know, I could do better, you know, looking at a year over year. But in general, some of the crews that in the past have had trouble did a lot better. You know, there's a couple of crews that we know have a lot of challenges with staying in budget, and the staff is more and more working closely with the crews that you know, we now have staff liaisons for all the crews, and they're really working hard at developing those relationships and that communication. And, you know, at the budget committee and management level, it's really important for us to understand if they're going over budget because we're not budgeting enough, or because there's some other problem with, you know, how the budget's being administered. And I think there's less than half a dozen crews that we're working really hard to try to get to the bottom of that. And we are paying attention to it. But in general, you know, out of over 60 crews, they do fantastic. It's really amazing with the number of people that we have that have financial and spending authority, how well they do. And we're paying attention to the ones who, you know, have been struggling with it.
Thank you. Is that it, AJ?
Yeah, I would just follow up to see, you know, it sounded like you answered it. Staff is working with those crews that are struggling to get them to kind of, you know, figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Paxton.
I just really want to thank the budget committee for recommending increasing the food vouchers to $4. That is something that I've argued in this meeting for decades in reality, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kirsten.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to tag on to what Hillary said. I would say the vast majority of the crews are under budget. And in the board meeting on February 3rd, or shall I say on Wednesday of this week, you will get the December financials, and you'll be able to see every crew and how they paced to their budgets, and see who is on budget and who is under budget and who's over budget. Thank you.
Any other board discussion? Last call for board discussion.
I have one more question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I'm not to belabor the issue, but I guess this is for Hillary. If a crew is consistently, does it make sense that a crew budgets for what it believes it is going to spend rather than using last year and the previous year's budget? Do you want more of the crews to come under budget, or how do they figure out that budget? Are you there helping them figure out if they're struggling, what number to actually put in for what their budget, so they're not consistently going over?
You know, we're talking about a really wide range of what happens within the crews. You know, like some coordinators have a lot of, you know, say an entertainment coordinator who is administering contracts and making offers and contracting for some, you know, other support services. They may have more control over their budget than a crew, say like kitchen, that can't control how many people show up to eat. They can control other things like a menu. They can try to reduce waste. You know, they can do some things. So it varies a tremendous amount from crew to crew. And I think, you know, we do work with crews, you know, when an issue arises, and the staff is working with them more and more, you know, definitely. But part of what we're definitely trying to get across is this, you know, this money that we're handling is, you know, it's the sweat equity of the volunteers and the fees that have been charged to the participating booth people. And, you know, we're stewards of that, and we're trying to handle it responsibly, and we're trying to get as much as we can out of it. We do a tremendous amount on the budget that we have. You know, it's much, much larger budget than most of our personal financial budgets, but for what we're able to do and how many people we entertain and provide services to and make safe, we're really stretching our dollar. And to get that ethic of using that money responsibly is a lot of what we want to try to get across. So that, and having the coordinators communicate about it. So, you know, we are really trying to to keep that up there. In the past, there have been some crews that were definitely felt a little bit defiant about a message of trying to be efficient. And you know, we work on it when we have a situation like that. We're really trying to have open, honest communication about the mission of the crew and what it takes to finish that mission.
Thank you for that, Hillary. Appreciate it.
Okay. Last call for any more board discussion. Raise your hand in chat. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. We are voting on adopting the crew budget as amended. Can you read the total one more time, Kirsten? Or I'll do it in my head.
Yes, the crew budget is now $1,220,137, an increase of $500. Thank you.
AJ,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
John Alexander,
Yes.
John Govsky,
Yes.
John Steinhardt,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Paxton.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Arna and John Davis absent. And that is all of the budget business, and we will move to meeting evaluation. If you have anything to say about meeting evaluation, raise your hand in chat. Last call. John Alexander.
I'm not sure how I spelled that because I was having a hard time, but Stephen, thank you for running another great meeting, and thanks tons to the crews and to the budget committee and everybody else, but just really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Sandra.
I wanted to say thank you to both Kirsten and Hillary for the guidance that they showed for through this whole process, and the work that was done and the care that was taken. It really is a work of love and competence. So thank you.
And Paxton.
I too want to thank Kirsten, Hillary, and the budget committee for doing this work. These are often one of the shortest meetings that we ever have, and this one I think is close to setting a record. Anyway, very good job. Thank you all.
Okay, last call for good of the order. Meeting evaluation. Seeing none, we will go. Next board meeting is February 3rd, 2025 at 7 p.m. online in the President's Piece.
President's Piece says peace to all, and thank you all for all your hard work. It's what makes this event happen and keeps us all safe and healthy. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.
Right.
See you later.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Have a good evening.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Support.
Good night.